Hey, MBA hopefuls, you're watching MBA Waves, your weekly vidcast, talking all things business and education every Tuesday on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Eric Lucrezia, joined as always by my host, Bara Sapir. Hi, Bara.
Hi, Eric. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you too. And this week we are focusing on Ivey Business School and what the case method really teaches you at Ivey Business School. We're joined by the Executive Director of Master's Admissions for MBA, Executive MBA and Master's in Management, JD Clarke, as well as an alumni from the class of 2021, Kailey Howell-Spooner, who's now a senior consultant at Deloitte. Welcome. How you doing, Ivey?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having us, Eric, and great to see you again on video. So
excited to be here as well.
Good to see you too, and nice to meet you, Kailey. Welcome to MBA Waves. So let's go around the room and introduce a little bit more who's joining us today. JD, want to let you start, being your professional staff?
Yeah. So my name is JD Clarke, and I'm the Executive Director of MBA Admissions here at the Ivey Business School. It's my pleasure to join you. I've been at Ivey on and off about 17 years. I spent about 25 years working in higher education. And really what I love about my job is working with candidates. And I would say that one of the things I talk about is that I'm in the dream business, and that's exciting. And what I love is I love seeing, and you'll hear Kailey's stories as well, as the impact an MBA can have on somebody both personally and professionally. And so it's a great job to be part of that journey with many individuals.
I fully understand that. I mean, higher ed's great, and I can see why you've stayed for 17 years in the industry. Kailey, hey, welcome to MBA Waves.
Thank you very much. So I'm situated in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, on the west coast here of our fantastic province. Very excited to join you here. I did my MBA, finished up in 2021. In June is when I graduated. My background is in English, language and literature, as well as public relations and communications. And I decided to make a bit of a career pivot. And so I decided to join the MBA, which led me into consulting. And I'm now with Deloitte as a senior consultant in operations.
Fantastic.
Nice. Well, JD, you spoke about being in the dream business. I love that. So can you tell us, are there any dreams that are new and exciting happening at the Ivey Business School and Western University in general?
Yeah, so, we're excited about this year. We're celebrating 100 years of our school. So it's our centennial. And we just went through a strategic planning process, actually, and released our new strategic plan. Just recently in the fall. It's called Ivey Next. And this would have been last fall. And there are three things I'll talk about that we're really excited about. The first thing is, it's really building on the legacy of Ivey, and developing strong leaders. But the first thing is we're really focusing on looking at critical issues facing business and really becoming that go-to place that individuals and organizations go to that really help them transform, understand, and deal with these critical issues. The three that we're starting with, and this is again in consultation with individuals, the first is around the evolution of work coming out of COVID. The second is around global citizenship and innovation and competitiveness. And then the third one is really dealing with sustainability. So we're excited about that. The second thing that's worth mentioning is just really looking at the way we do teaching. We're going to talk about the case study, but we look at this as case study 2.0. So really looking at the case study methodology and how we can make it, using technology to make it more engaging and, really providing and building on a strong classroom experience. And the example I use is, imagine you're doing a case on an airport. You have lots of cases on airports, but you can put on VR goggles and actually go in and see what you're studying in the case. So really looking at that. And the third thing is developing an ecosystem of lifelong learning. So as individuals graduate from our program and move on as alumni, continuing to be Ivey as a place they come back to, because learning and development is going to take, we're preparing you for a workplace of the future that we don't know what will exist, but there are things that come up. When I did my MBA, there was nothing talked about fintech, but it's that ability to come back and to brush up on things and really sort of career support and also developing new knowledge and concepts as you evolve in different stages of your career. So those are the three things we're excited about.
Sounds great. Sounds really exciting. I love the VR goggles.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing. Yeah.
universities, business schools are some of the first institutions in the world to get like that kind of technology, which requires obviously hardware to do that. And I see that really more and more in the future becoming a mainstay with business education, MBAs, potentially integrating metaverse stuff to make it really more real, especially if you're talking about online programs. But talking about the MBA, speaking about the MBA program, what are some of the standout unique features of the MBA at Ivey?
Yeah, I will say, and then I'll let Kailey kind of jump in as well. And I think there's two. And I think the way we do teaching, I mean, that's why you're doing an MBA program. I'll say this, and I've worked in many MBA programs and know a lot. A curriculum in an MBA is pretty comparable across different schools. An MBA is an MBA. But the way we do teaching and the case study methodology and just an engaging classroom experience is a big difference. But I also think the culture that we have in the school, and I think the location being in a university town, London, Ontario, where everyone is immersing themselves in the experience of coming here to study is part of it. And you know, the analogy I use, I'm a big person in analogies, is there's two ways you can learn a language. One is you can get tapes and Rosetta Stone and learn that. The other way is you immerse yourself in the experience. And truly, when you come here, everyone is coming here for schools, whether you know, to study for your MBA, whether you're a domestic student from Canada or an international student, everyone's coming to London to study, and it creates a really tight culture within the class. And I think those are the two stand-up things. I think Kailey is probably the best to kind of provide more color because she went through it, but those are the two standout things that we hear from alumni and that we see.
So Kailey.
Yeah, absolutely, JD. I think one of the things that really stood out to me was class contribution. And, you know, when we're thinking about the way that Ivey teaches, yes, of course, there's great professors and there's, you know, the content, as JD mentioned, is pretty much the same. But really the way that the professors engage with you and the way that they draw out your sort of thinking and your responses is really quite different than I think a lot of learning in other institutions. So leaning into the fact that, you know, MBAs and Ivey specifically is really a leadership school. They really want you to stand up, speak out, and teach you to lead from experience. So, you know, working closely with your learning teams and then being sort of pushed to contribute in the classroom is something that really, I think, inspired a lot of people to grow in their leadership ways and in the way that they talk and think about business.
That's great. We've sort of gone over this case method, and I know that Ivey Business School is really known for the case method. So can you share with us exactly what it is for those who aren't familiar with it, and also why you adopted it and what it means specifically at Ivey and for Ivey students? Like, give us a primer on the case.
Yeah. So the case methodology actually started by Harvard. And my understanding on how it started is Harvard looked at their medical school at the time they started their business school and said, how can we get people learning about business in front of patients? Just like, you know, when you go through medical school, you actually are a resident, you're dealing with patients. So they came up with this idea of cases. And what cases are is they're not stories, they're real business situations and you're immersed in it. They're not used as examples either. They're not like, you know, here's what happened in this organization, let's use it. It's like you become the role of the decision maker. So the best analogy, it's like a corporate flight simulator. It's like, you know, you're in a situation, you've got to make a decision. There's no right or wrong decision. There are sometimes decisions better than others, but no right or wrong decision. And basically your learning is taking that knowledge and concepts and applying it right away in a classroom environment. So these cases are real business situations. So think about the program. You're doing over 300 cases. I think the last time I counted is like 320 cases. And you're doing them, but you're also taking that learning, they're across industries, and you're making a decision each time that you look at the cases. And I think there's three things that are really important. It's a very engaging classroom environment. That's what you have to understand, is that it's a business discussion with a faculty member. You're not being, you know, lectured to. And the faculty member's there to kind of pull out key learnings and facilitate a discussion. So it's like walking into a meeting, solving a problem. And so you come into class ready to talk about you've done your analysis and you're ready to talk about it. But the case study methodology, I want to point three things, and then Kailey can share some, you know, examples. And even, you know, you're developing your knowledge, but you're also developing experience. So the first time you're applying your learning is not back into the workforce. So to use that analogy of a corporate flight simulator, if you're a pilot, the first time you're actually flying is not with passengers. You're sitting in a simulator and you're doing it. And so you learn by your mistakes and you get that confidence as you go. The second thing is that it builds in an accountability for people to prepare for class. My undergraduate degree is in history. I was lectured to when I went into a classroom environment. Whether I did the readings beforehand, no one's going to know. This is like walking into a meeting at work. If you've not done a prep for the case, you're going to know. So what happens is everyone comes in prepared, which elevates the learning of everyone else around you, because there's an expectation you've come in. You're going to have a discussion-based environment. The third thing is you're going to get feedback as you go along on how you're able to understand the concepts and apply them. So, you know, it's not like sitting and waiting till you do a midterm or a final exam before you get feedback about whether you're understanding. And the key thing is you're not getting feedback just from the faculty member, you're getting feedback from the students in the class. The last thing I'll point out, it's a very social aspect of learning. So you learn about people's backgrounds, you know, and I think because you're coming in and having this discussion, there's a social infrastructure around the learning, which really sort of elevates the classroom environment. So it's a classroom environment where you go in for a 90-minute class and you don't want the class to end because it goes so quick. But I remember being in my undergrad and that 90 minutes felt painful being lectured to. But this is a very different environment. So, but that's sort of the history of it. So.
What's interesting to me with what you're saying, because we do test prep, is that the MCAT has a section on it called the CARS, which is the verbal section. And it actually simulates what you're talking about, where you're diagnosing a problem and thinking a couple steps ahead of what the patient would need, but it's actually verbal, using literature, using essays. So it's super interesting that there's this connection between medical school and looking at cases and the case method that you're discussing. It's understanding the tests, the GMAT as well. Like, wow, that's the GMAT sort of has it doesn't really have an equivalent to what the MCAT has for future doctors. So Kailey, did you want to share about your experience with the case method?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, everything that JD said, I feel strongly that is the case in my experience at Ivey. You know, the textbook says, you know, A plus B equals C, but that's not what real life is like. Real life is messy. Real life is complicated. It is easy to make these sort of tough decisions in a silo. But with the case methodology, you're sort of given context and background information into the pressures that leadership is facing when they're making these decisions. You know, it may look like a simple operations, you know, solution. Oh, we just need to increase output. Oh, but if there's a labor dispute, oh, but if the economy is doing this, or, oh, if your finances are saying that, you know, that easy decision becomes a lot more complicated. So having a little bit more exposure to the way that businesses work in real life through the case methodology was very helpful. Additionally, sort of leveraging your peers' experiences. You know, I came from telecommunications, and so I felt very confident in that space. But, you know, hearing about people who came from the military, who came from government, who came from industry, who came from consulting, who came from any number of industries, and hearing their very different perspective on how they would approach the case, or how they had seen leaders at their own previous organizations approach a similar situation, it just amplifies your learning that much more. And what I really appreciated as well is that, you know, the professors are really acting as facilitators. They know all of our backgrounds. They, you know, often, you know, during a classroom situation, one of the professors would say, oh, Kailey, I believe you worked, you know, in this area. Did you ever have an experience with this? Or what are some of the nuances from a technology perspective that you would potentially bring to this case? So they know where and when to draw from people and how to get the best answers and best solutions to these problems. So it really is an immersive experience.
Keeps you on your toes, right? JD, you were talking a little bit about culture before, and, you know, those of us who work in the MBA field, we're always talking about finding the right fit. We're coaching people either preparing the GMAT or their strategy for their application. And, you know, with all the many MBA programs out there, it's hard to choose. And I think most professionals would agree that it really is all about finding the right fit. You know, every school delivers something a little bit differently. And I think it comes down a lot to culture, which is what you were speaking about earlier. So could you tell us a little bit more about the culture at Ivey?
Yeah, and I'll describe it this way. You can't see it in the background, but over on this side, I have a poster hanging on my wall that says, "Work hard and be nice to others." And we talk to candidates a lot that not only are you earning an MBA, you're earning a network as well. And so I think one of the myths that people have just about MBA schools in general, that it's a cutthroat competitive environment. I was walking in this morning, and when I was coming in, there were two, current MBA students. They're, getting ready for fall recruitment. So interviews have started. They're both going for the same job, but they're prepping each other for interviews. And the magic of it is, once somebody gets hired, they're going to go out and celebrate that other person too. And so I think there's a real, like, if I talk about the culture and summarize it at Ivey, and Kailey can add to it too, is that we care. And I think that there's a caring element from alumni to the students. There's a caring element across the students and just kind of elevating them up, student to student. There's also faculty to student, staff to student. There's a real caring atmosphere about each other. And I think that's one of the myths, is people kind of think about an MBA school and think it's going to be cutthroat and competitive, and sharing is caring. If you find an article that can elevate to the discussion in the case class, you distribute it to everybody. And so I think that's the magic of the culture, is there's a very caring, and I know we'll talk about sort of the alumni network, but it's sort of a pay it forward culture. But that starts when you're a student in the program and you remember how people were treating each other and how alumni treated you and cared about you.
That's
really good to know, and very important I was going to say important for candidates to understand, like knowing yourself. And I always say it starts with you, right? Who are you as a candidate, as a professional, as a future MBA student? So understanding what kind of learner you are, what kind of environment you would flourish in or not, and understanding the schools that out there that match with that. And I've always known that to some extent about Ivey, knowing a lot of people have worked there over the years, but it's good to hear it in more detail. And I don't know if Kailey wanted to add to that.
I fully agree with JD. I'm just boosting everything JD is saying here, but no, it's true. And I know that was an environment that I would thrive in. And I've been lucky enough to work at organizations, in my history that have that very team forward culture. And I find that the best solutions to problems is through teams that work well and work hard together. And you can only do that through collaboration and, through positive interactions. And I think the more that we experience that, the better we all get collectively. Business is not a silo. You don't come up with, the greatest solution ever on your own. You need to collaborate. And you need to collaborate with people who, you may not agree with. And so, learning to work together and, realizing that we're all in this together and ultimately we want to become the best versions of ourselves. You boost each other naturally through that. And Ivey encourages that. You can't do it on your own. There's a ton of help across each other for cases. I'm not the best at accounting, but boy, can I do a behavioral interview question, right? And so, leveraging each other's strengths and, leaning on each other to make sure that you're all collectively making the most out of your MBA experience is something that I think every class strives for.
I just want to add, because I'll take it back to the case study methodology, because I think it's and I forgot to mention in the intro, I'm also an MBA graduate of Ivey as well. So I've been through the program. And I think one of the things the case study methodology taught to me is it gave you really good skill sets to deal with somebody that might disagree with you on something and feel comfortable with it. And I think great leaders are the ones that promote a dissension. And I don't mean that as a negative word. It's like some of the best ideas or a safe environment where people can say, well, I totally disagree with that. And what's great, like one of the things, that's something I felt very uncomfortable with. But when you get into the program and you put yourself out there on a case and you go, this is what I think, and somebody puts up their hand and goes, I completely disagree with you. It's how do you how do you deal with that? And because dissension is good and disagreements is good, because that's what makes organizations from good to great.
It sounds so refreshing.
Yeah. Sorry, Bara. I was going to say, I think it's very healthy as an individual, but also for the organization to feel like safe, to be able to dissent and speak your mind, your truth, what you believe to be correct. And I think some of the best examples of that were within the U.S. Supreme Court, like going back a generation, looking at like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia, who were famously on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and at the same time were also great friends. So they were able to, speak about their court opinion, dissenting against each other, but still keeping a friendly and professional environment. And actually, they were good friends outside of their jobs as well.
And respectful, right? Because it's how you receive it, but how you give it is equally as important to get trained on too.
Yeah, we need some of that in the U.S. right now.
Yeah.
I'm having some issues right now.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the admissions process. I think that there's many listeners who are wanting to apply to your program, and so they want to know what they can expect and what suggestions you offer so they can be a great applicant for Ivey. I mean, obviously being their authentic self is probably something that's super important, but it's also a training ground. So what can they think about as their...
Yeah, I think I'm going to mention this in two things. And I know one might seem, I think the first thing is candidates should never self-select themselves out. And I will say I did my MBA on the later stage of my career, like of the later stage of sort of the demographic. And the reason is that I had really poor grades in my undergrad. So I thought I'll never get into graduate school. And I also came from a history background. And my only regret is I wish I did it earlier. But I didn't do it earlier because I kind of said to myself, well, so never self-select yourself out thinking, well, I'm not a typical MBA candidate. We're looking for tomorrow's leaders, which come from all different backgrounds. The second thing is engage with the school before you apply, so that we can get to know you beforehand and know what's important to you, provide you that support on kind of researching the program and such. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, I would say be comfortable with your application, knowing you're going to have strengths that you feel proud of, and you're going to have, weaknesses that you might, for me, it was my undergrad grades. I'm like, but we look at files holistically as well. And that's why it's important to kind of engage earlier, is to kind of, get that sense of, here's what I'm really proud of, but here's what I'm not, and that we can help you put your best foot forward. I think the key thing when people are applying is be your authentic self, but also I think the important thing is talk about your impact and accomplishments more about than what you do in your job description. Kind of change that. Think about those times you were like, I remember doing a job interview once and the person said, what was that point in your career where you were like, you felt like so accomplished, it was the proudest moment of your career? Like, think about those times, right? And make sure that you bring those forward. So that would be my advice.
I'm wondering if the case method when you were in business school your grades wound up going way up, because the learning style was probably different than you're sitting in a lecture hall for 90 minutes. Right?
Yeah, and you know what? It was sort of as though it was professionally satisfying doing an MBA. I learned a ton, and professionally it was great. It was also personally, because I was never proud of my undergraduate grades. And in some ways, it wasn't about me intellectually. It was probably, well, I know for sure it was the age I was. I was also the first person in my family to go to university, so I had to work part-time while I went through school. But I did a history degree. I enjoyed history in high school. I didn't enjoy it in university as much. So, but yeah, you're right. The grades went way up, so.
So, very connected to the admissions process is the GMAT, right? Which I think is a big, scary thing for a lot of people. Standardized testing has been a big topic actually since COVID and even before.
Yep,
but
I agree.
At Ivey, what is the GMAT or GRE perhaps? Is it important for Ivey? How important? What's your take overall? I'll let JD probably.
So I'll talk about pre-COVID and I'll talk post-COVID, because you're right, Eric. There's been a lot of changes after COVID on the GMAT and how it's looked at in the broader graduate management. We've always considered the GMAT as one of those criteria we look at, but not the overarching one. But we did look at it as proof of your academic capability. So for me, that came in with bad grades. The GMAT was really important for me because I had to prove that, I did have the intellectual capability that's there. So that was pre-COVID. The only exemption that we had is that somebody would have a CFA. So post-COVID, and what happened during COVID, this is probably, you probably discussed this a lot with your candidates, is, all of a sudden COVID happened and GMAT had a test that you had to go to a center. They did not have, it's March. And so a lot of schools started looking at, because of the environment, people couldn't write the GMAT. Programs were starting in September. People had test book that were canceled. They didn't have an online version, is saying, can we offer GMAT exemptions when somebody is coming in with the proof that they have the capability of it, right? The analytical capability. So now we offer a GMAT exemption if you have a Canadian CPA, which is our accounting designation. We offer it if you have a Canadian PEng, which is an engineering designation. So you've proven you have the analytical capability through your previous training. And also if you have a CFA. And the CFA is a global designation, so wherever you've earned the CFA. So we look at it that way, is that, you know, if you've proven it through those means, then the GMAT is exempt. The average GMAT that we have is around 670, but the range is anywhere from 520 to 780. So it is one of those components. The last thing I will say is we'll never deny somebody just because of the GMAT. You know, so if the GMATs are only concern, or the GRE score, then we'll give you a conditional offer about writing a higher score. So, you know, it's never a case where we'll deny somebody just because of that test score. There's something else in their file other than that, because if the GMAT was the only concern, we'd give you a conditional offer of achieving a higher score.
And is the EA ever considered for the instead of the GMAT?
Yeah, the executive assessment, not in our full-time MBA, but definitely in the executive MBA where we look at that. So,
got it.
Yeah.
Neat. So what about academics? We all know that Ivey has amazing professors, and faculty is at the heart of any degree. So who are some of your star professors these days, and what are they working on?
Sure. So I'll turn it over to Kailey, because I know she has a stop at 1:30. But I think I'll talk Kailey to talk about I think the magic in our faculty members is we have a lot of faculty that do great research in lots of cool areas. But to me, I think the magic is how they interact with their students. And I think that it's a very, back to our sort of the caring, there's a very collegial atmosphere with the faculty. We are not an environment that have office hours. You know, the faculty are accessible. And so maybe I'll turn it over to Kailey for her last thing to talk about that, because I think it's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that Ivey hires professors who are not just leaders in academia and research. They are also people who really, truly care about the classroom and believe in the case study methodology. I was very often encouraged to reach out, ask questions, put your hand up, send an email, book a meeting. Like, it was very supportive. And, you know, this was during the COVID times. We had one of our professors who we actually nominated for our favorite professor that year. It was right before our midterm, and he ran a tutorial, like sort of last minute, day before, for about 3 hours, just running us through everything all over again, because this was our first midterm in the MBA, and we were all nervous, and we were doing it online. It was COVID times. And he's like, you know what? I'm taking time out of my day and my family dinner in order to sit with you and make sure everyone had every single one of their questions answered, and felt confident in their capabilities to do this midterm. So that was a real standout moment, I think, for all of us in the MBA, that, you know, the faculty care, and they're going to do whatever they can to make it the best experience possible. Another quick standout moment was my accounting professor. He knew that a lot of people were uncomfortable with accounting, and he set up a student delegation of people who weren't from accounting, who could advocate for those from backgrounds that, you know, were in the arts and the histories and that kind of area, to say, you know, I really don't understand, you know, how this works, or, you know, this person in this class said they were uncomfortable speaking up, you know, and so to have that advocacy and to have a group of student leaders, you know, work one-on-one with your accounting professor to make sure that we understood everything, that's huge. And I think that is a real differentiator.
It sounds like a great, really vibrant culture to be in. And like you said before, we're all in this together. It really feels like people celebrate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, Kailey, if you have to duck out at any point, feel free to do so. I'm just going to continue with the questions. And if you want to stick around, if you got to go, everything's fine. Either way, it was great chatting with you.
I'll sign off now. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Kailey. Great to see you again. Thank you.
Bye.
So JD, let's pivot over to careers. I mean, this is obviously one of the main reasons, right, that people take the risk to quit their job and spend a ton of money on an MBA, and they want to know what the ROI is. So a lot of people watching today, they're going to want to know what the ROI is at Ivey. So could you tell us a little about the career services team at Ivey and what graduates can expect in terms of employment opportunities for locals as well as those who are coming from outside of Canada?
Yeah, so I'll start by just saying what support that we offer. And I think there's sort of three buckets that I'll talk about. And the first is we have programming that's included in the program. So these are like everyone has to go through it. So I'll give an example. It's things like, we do sessions on storytelling. Storytelling is a huge element of being able to network. We do sessions on networking. I mean, a lot of international students, networking is sort of a foreign concept, right? So, and that's built into the curriculum. Everyone goes through it. The second thing that happens is that, that individuals may need touch-ups on different things. So we have optional sessions. I mean, one of the things that we do is we bring in actors. And we actually do a mock networking session, a corporate networking session. So the students get dressed up. They really kind of, get an impression of what it's like, and it's a safe environment. So thinking about the case study methodology, it's like kind of walking through a case of a networking session. And the third, which I think is the most that a lot of people do, and I mean, we do coaching, one-on-one coaching. And so individuals have access to career coaches. They will be able to talk to them about different things. And we also have technical coaches that we bring in. So for instance, if you're going for a job in capital markets or investment banking, you need to kind of know the technical aspects of the interview. So we will bring in alumni to kind of coach you on that. So there's lots of sort of one-on-one coaching. People going into consulting, they need to know how to do case interviews in the interview, which is different than the classroom. And so how do I kind of pivot to that? So we bring in alumni to help with that. I think the last stat that I saw was that, people would have, students in our program have, on average, about 30 interactions one-on-one with a coach. And so there's a high level of support. And that allows you to kind of do the support that's very unique. Somebody might not feel comfortable with an interview. Somebody might be, negotiating salary. And so it can take on a huge thing. Career prospects, and here's what I will say is on our website, you can, and all schools, you can download employment reports and look at them. But the true power of an MBA is not that first job after graduation. So I encourage people, the employment reports are important because you're quitting your job, back to your point, Eric. There's a big aspect of an unknown and there's a lot of fear around it. But I would say the employment report talks about that job after MBA. The real power of an MBA is that you're investing in your career moving forward. And so, after the MBA, what people go into, about 1/3 go into, financial services or finance. That's not, there's roles in marketing and HR and rotational programs, but and in Canada, they're huge employers. About 1/3 will go into consulting. And consulting is a huge pipeline where people are, they hire a ton from MBA programs and undergraduate business programs as sort of their talent pipeline, and about 1/3 everything else. So that's CPG, that's not-for-profit, that is technology, telecom companies. Our average salary is about 122,000 Canadian. But again, the power of the MBA is looking 5 years out, 5-10 years out. It's really investment in your career. You're really, you want to do two things with an MBA. You want to make sure that when you get out, the doors open up for you. That's the goal of your first job after graduation. Doors are open for you. As you move forward in your career, what your MBA is going to do is make sure doors don't close. And that's equally as important as well. The last thing I will mention is that the large majority, and when I mean large majority, I'm talking 99% of our international students end up staying in Canada. I mean, that's a huge reason why international students are coming to the school, is that they want to have the option to stay in Canada and progress as a permanent resident and then ultimately citizenship. I had a proud moment a couple of weeks ago where I was a witness at a citizenship ceremony. It was virtual, but it was a citizenship ceremony of somebody that I met in India in about 2016, 2017 that became a Canadian citizen. And so I think that is really, when you think about the payback for international students, it's not only their job, but it's also making sure that they, have that option to stay in Canada. And for many, they come and stay in Canada.
That is one of the big draws. I know I think it depends on the kind of program, but a lot of Masters in MBA programs offer a pathway to have, first of all, I think it's 3 years that you can live and work in Canada post program. And then that could ultimately become a pathway to citizenship, I guess, or long-term or PR.
Yeah, and for a lot of our candidates, they, not to get in the nitty-gritty of Canadian citizenship, but it's a big important aspect to Canada is having an immigration policy. And so our candidates getting into our program qualify for express entry. So they get permanent residency either before they start, or they, we have resources to help people, because you want to. So there's a postgraduate work permit, which is really a bridge to get permanent residency. That's what the government wants you to go, and then permanent residency to citizenship. So you can become a citizen in Canada within about a 5-year period. So it is quite attractive for individuals to kind of, if you follow that path of a postgraduate work permit into permanent residency, and citizenship is 5 years later. So
I mean, it's a big country with a lot of space, and it's beautiful. So
yeah, it is. I'm proud of it. So
yeah.
And the winters aren't that bad. So
when I was chatting with Kailey earlier, obviously today's episode is focusing on the case method, and I was going to ask her if she thought there were any long-term benefits or implications of studying with the case method in terms of employment. And I don't know if you're able to comment that.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. I think what we hear from, our alumni, and I'll give my even experience in it. Like when we hear from alumni, and we also hear from our recruiters, so corporate, people that hire our students, is that Ivey grads are able to hit the ground running quicker. And it comes back to that aspect is you've lived that experience already. And so, one time in my career after my MBA, I went through a merger like a merger, and there were 3 bodies going to the merger. And after that, we were working with a consulting firm that came in that were helping with the post-integration of the merger. And so I was responsible for the operations. So things like facilities and HR and everything sort of around that. And about 2 weeks in the project, the partner that was on the project from the consulting firm took me aside and said, "Where have you worked on mergers and acquisitions before?" I said, "I've never done this before." And they said, "What?" And to me, it was the training at Ivey. I had done it before, and I wasn't going home and opening up my case books and, opening up my textbooks and brushing up on it. It was like living a case. And, it was sort of like, okay, and there's a way of thinking that comes with that. What type of questions should I be asking? You really get good at, in the case study, of understanding the issue before you go to solution. Because let's face it, we all like solutions. That's what gives us kind of energy. Let's fix something, right? We don't spend the time. So you become a faster, better decision maker. But, because you've lived through that experience, going through school, not just the knowledge, but you're applying it right away, is that you're ready to hit the ground running, much quicker sort of coming out of it. So.
Right. It's not just theory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the theory is important, right? And here's an MBA program, back to the theory. The theories are frameworks and concepts. That's what an MBA program is. But you can't be a model taker. That means, like, I've learned a model and now I've got to apply it to a situation exactly how the model works. What we do with the case study methodology is we actually make you a model maker. Because part of it is you learn the models, but you got to change those models, maybe combine different models to fit another situation. There's a lot of studies in 2008. What happened is many people just focused on the models. The models tell me that the risk in this is very low. But the model, you have to kind of dig deeper than the model and kind of realize what else is under there. And the case study methodology teaches you that.
Would you say that your history background, where things were very much flat during undergrad, became alive in the case method? It seems
a little bit, yes and no. In some ways good, in some ways bad. So, so I'll give you an example. Cases cases are written in a way that they give you the history of the case, So I remember one of the first cases we did was on Jack Welch. I could remember when Jack Welch was born. I could remember the case facts. But the issue is the cases are much more about the so what. So, I had to change my thinking, because history is very much about fact-based, going back into history. But it was very much in, the case study is much more than that. The facts aren't really as important as the so what behind it. So this was what happened in the organization in the past, so why is that relevant? So it did help. I mean, the arts background, definitely, because you learned to, I had a classmate that was, back to Haley's example of A plus B equals C, it's like, he worked as an engineer, construction engineer. And if he's a millimeter off on his measurements, a building collapses, right? And so you're sitting in that case and, you're in an accounting case and somebody has an answer that's different than the person that sits beside, but you're both right because you use different assumptions. In an arts background, I felt more comfortable than an engineer that would be beside me. But, that's the magic of an MBA is you come with different backgrounds, and it's sort of, you evolve as a person and a professional from that.
Right. And you have this diversity in the class, right? It's like
exactly.
Kailey was saying about the military or government
or
profit, all of a sudden you get to benefit from everyone else who's around you, which is a great segue in talking about the Alumni Network, right? So I've often heard that the program is really as good as its alumni. So what are your alumni doing, and what kind of services exist for them at Ivey?
Yeah, and I would say I will talk, it comes back to what the school's known for. Right. And you get that question from candidates all the time is, what's your school known for? And we're known for developing leaders in all different industries and functions. So it's not like, we're known as a finance school. And so, most of our alumni are in finance. We're all over the place where it's at. We're known as a leadership school. So people are, leaders across many different industries and across many different functions. The support for alumni is interesting as, we have what every school has. So you have alumni chapters, and you have, services that alumni participate in. We do homecoming, so alumni come back and celebrate and such. We do sessions in all various cities. We have one day, which we call a Global Ivey Day, which is like, all the chapters across Canada. I forget how many events that we do, but it's something like 65 to 80. All that day celebrate being an Ivey grad all around the world that one day. But I would say what's more defines the Alumni Network is the culture of supporting one another. And, I think, and this is where the magic really comes in. And it's, why is that? And I think it's that momentum. I think, Kailey remembers as a student how supportive the alumni were to her. And, she is as supportive, going to be moving forward. And so it's that momentum. That rock is moving down the hill. And Ivey is very much like, a Harvard Business School. Is like when people graduate, their affiliation is with the business school rather than the university. And so I think that's really important. I'll give a personal story. As my daughter's boyfriend just graduated with his undergraduate degree. It's tough to find a job when you first graduate. And, you don't have a professional network set up. And so, I said to him, I'll help you and I'll introduce you to some alumni. And, I said, he goes, well, introduce me to a ton. I said, you know what? I'm going to contact like 5 a week because I know those 5 are going to get back to me. And, after the first week, he said to me, I can't believe how generous people were with their time. Like looking at my resume, saying I will redo my resume, offering to be a reference. And, I think the magic of the Alumni Network is we just have an expectation, and it's more of a cultural expectation that's there that, it's that pay it forward is if I get a request to help somebody, I'm going to help that person because I know I may need that at the same time. And so I think that's the magic that makes the alumni. We had our new dean started. I mean, it was about 4 years ago, but I remember her telling stories that she couldn't believe, she always heard about the Ivey Alumni Network, always heard about it, but she couldn't believe it until she got out there meeting people. And she described it as a stickiness, right? There's a stickiness that's there about the alumni. It's like once you're in and, it's that support that you provide others that's incredibly important.
It feels good. It feels so good to have people.
It does, for sure it does. And you also have a shared experience, right? You have a shared experience going through the case study methodology, right? So you always get these alumni talking in this way of like, what was your favorite case? And you have that shared experience, and that's sort of a good baseline to it.
Something to bond over. JD, it's been great speaking with you today and learning so much about IT, of course, with Kailey as well. Anything you want to add before we say goodbye? Any like upcoming open house dates? Any maybe perhaps?
Yeah, I would say people are interested in Ivey.
We can put it in,
so
you could
we
just
are
in the chat, and I'll add it to the screen on the bottom if any kind of admissions email.
Yeah, I would say go on our website ivymba.ca and look at some things there. A couple things to highlight. We have an event section. We are starting to sort of travel all over the world to, again, participating in MBA fairs, but we have lots of online events that are there as well. But we have lots of great podcasts and webinars. And so I'd really invite people to go on there on different topics. Like we have one on the first 60 days of the program, and then we take the same people and do the last 60 days of the program. And so there's lots of great content on the podcasts and webinars that we do. And when we survey our students when they come in, those podcasts and webinars always are ranked right up there. If you're interested in the program and kind of, I would really encourage you to get in touch with us before applying, start engaging with us. So on our website, you'll see there's a way that you can do profile assessment. That's sending us your LinkedIn profile or resume. And that's where we kind of have an initial thing and say, like, we like what we see. You should move forward with an application. It allows us to get to know you, to start working with you. And that's generally the first step that people take to start engaging with us.
Okay. Perfect. So everything can be found on the website.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you once again. It's been a great episode getting to know Ivey. And for those of you listening, don't forget, next week, as always on Tuesday, we have another episode of MBA Waves. Next week, we're going to be talking about essays and filing your MBA application essays for round one, a really important topic. Many of you are already working with a coach. Many of you are thinking about it. We're going to dive into that next Tuesday. So thank you once again, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks to me.